The night I was caught, I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, wearing a soft gray cardigan, a pleated navy skirt I had bought 3 towns over so nobody would recognize me, and a shade of lipstick so close to natural rose that I had convinced myself it barely counted as lipstick at all, which was the kind of lie I had been telling myself for years, because if I made every little thing sound smaller, softer, easier to explain, then maybe I would not have to admit what it really meant that I kept a Second Life folded into a locked storage trunk beneath my bed, what it meant that I knew my measurements better than I knew my own pulse, what it meant that every time I looked at myself like that, even with shaking hands and the bedroom door checked 3 times, I did not feel like I was pretending. I felt like I was arriving. I remember the exact sound the doorknob made before the door opened, because it was not dramatic, not loud, not the kind of noise you hear in movies when everything changes. It was just a small metallic click followed by the quiet swing of old wood, and then my sister Lena was standing there with one grocery bag cutting into her wrist, staring at me with eyes so wide that for 1 second I thought she had stopped breathing. I did not scream. I did not cover myself. I think I turned to stone. Every defense I had built in my head over the years vanished at once. I had always imagined I would say something if I was ever found out, some clever line, some desperate explanation, but all I managed was a dry, broken, "Please close the door."
She did.
That was the first surprise. The second was that she set the grocery bag on my desk, leaned against the door, looked at me again from head to toe, and said, in a voice so calm it frightened me more than shouting would have, "Mom knew." I stared at her, and my whole body went cold. My mother had been dead for 11 months. I had buried her in a black suit that felt like a costume from another person's life. I had cried so hard at the graveside that my father had clapped a hand on my shoulder and told me to stand up straight because my mother hated displays, which was not true. She loved real feeling, but grief gets rewritten by the people who survive it. And now my sister was telling me that the person I had lost, the person I had never dared tell, had known. "Don't," I whispered, because it felt cruel, like opening a window in winter. "I'm not trying to hurt you," Lena said. "I'm trying to stop you from collapsing, because you look like you're about to." She crossed the room slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal, and pulled open my desk drawer without asking. From inside, beneath bills and receipts and a tangle of charging cables, she lifted a cream envelope sealed with one strip of faded floral tape. My name was written on it in our mother's handwriting, but not the name everybody used. It said, "For the child who has been hiding." I think my knees gave out before my mind did. I sat on the edge of my bed, because suddenly I was afraid I would hit the floor. Lena stood over me, still gentle, still terribly composed, and said, "She gave this to me 2 weeks before she died. She told me not to hand it to you unless you were ready, and if you were never ready, then maybe you would never need it. Tonight I came in because I forgot my charger and I saw you, and I think this is the moment she meant." I did not take the letter. I was afraid that if I touched it, my life as I knew it would end on contact. "How long?" I asked. Lena sat beside me. "She suspected when you were 13. She knew by the time you were 16. I laughed then, one sharp, miserable sound. "That's impossible. You are not nearly as invisible as you thought," she said, and there was no cruelty in it, only sadness. "You think a mother doesn't notice when one child never roughhouses, when he stares too long at fabric displays, when he volunteers to help steam dresses before weddings, when he gets quiet every time someone jokes about men in makeup?" I pressed my palms into my eyes. My lipstick smeared. Why didn't she say anything? Because she was afraid you would run deeper into hiding if she cornered you. She thought if she loved you normally and kept the door open, maybe someday you'd walk through. That hurt more than exposure. All those years I had spent imagining the humiliation, the disgust, the rejection, and instead there had been a waiting room I never entered. Lena placed the envelope in my hands. "Read it." My fingers trembled so badly, I tore the flap crooked. The paper inside smelled faintly like cedar and her old hand cream, or maybe I imagined that because I needed something solid to hold on to. Her words were steady, careful, the writing of a woman who knew she might not get a second chance. She said that if I was reading the letter, then either she had been right about what I carried inside me, or life had become painful enough that I could not keep carrying it alone. She said there was nothing shameful in softness and nothing broken in longing. She said she had spent years wondering whether I was a son who needed room to express beauty or a daughter who had not yet found the strength to name herself, and that only I could ever know the answer. She said that if fear had taught me to bury myself, then love should be the thing that brought me back. She said Lena would help me if I let her. She said, and this is the line that split me open, you do not become real when others approve of you. You become real when you stop abandoning yourself. I bent forward so fast the letter slipped from my hand, and then I was crying into my skirt, into my own shaking lap, not neatly, not quietly, but with the raw helplessness of somebody who has spent too many years holding a wall in place and suddenly discovers the wall was load-bearing and his whole life is now tilting. Lena put one arm around my shoulders. She did not tell me it would be fine. She did not say any of the empty things people say when they want pain to hurry along. She just stayed there while the old self I had been performing cracked in real time. When I finally looked up, my mascara had blurred under my eyes. I had only ever practiced with drugstore products and internet tutorials watched with the volume almost off, but even through the mess, even with my face swollen from crying, I saw something in the mirror that made my chest hurt in a new way. I did not look ridiculous. I looked frightened, yes. Exposed, absolutely. But not ridiculous. Lena followed my gaze. You look beautiful, she said quietly. I almost asked her not to say that, because I did not know where to put the ache it caused, but the truth was I had needed to hear it for so long that the word landed in me like rain on dry ground. I don't know what this means, I said. It means, she answered, that whatever this is, you don't have to do it alone anymore. If the story ended there, it would be the kind of ending people like to imagine, the secret found, the tears shed, the healing already underway, but real life does not turn that kindly. Real life lets the truth in and then demands rent. The first sign of that came the next morning when I woke up after maybe 2 hours of sleep and found a photo on my phone from an unknown number. It was me, reflected in my bedroom mirror, wearing the cardigan and skirt, my face streaked from crying. The message beneath it said, nice look. Wonder what your father would say. For a full minute, I could not breathe. I checked my door, my windows, the hall, everything, as if the sender might still be inside the house. Lena was in the kitchen drinking coffee, and the second she saw my face, she stood up. I handed her the phone. She read the message once, then again, jaw tightening. That wasn't me. I know. Did you post anything? Save anything anywhere? No, my mind raced in frantic circles. My curtains had been half open. My room faced the narrow side yard between our house and the neighboring duplex. Anyone in the right place at the right time could have gotten a shot through the gap. Delete it, I said, though I had no idea if that would help. No, Lena said immediately. We keep it. We document everything. She sounded so sure that for a second I forgot to panic and just listened. This is either a threat or somebody being cruel for sport. Either way, you do not hand them control by acting ashamed. I am ashamed, I snapped, and then hated myself for saying it out loud. Lena's expression changed, not wounded, just very sad. No, she said. You've been trained to feel shame. That's not the same thing. The number sent a second message before noon. Heard your boss has old school values. Could ruin your whole little life. That was when the day stopped feeling abstract. My boss was not just my boss. It was my father. I worked in the office of the family hardware business because that was what sensible sons did in our town. They stayed close, took over steady things, learned to stack responsibility higher than desire. I had spent 4 years balancing invoices, payroll, supplier calls, and the silent expectation that one day I would inherit not just the store, but the shape of manhood my father considered respectable. He wore his beliefs like pressed shirts, flat and immovable. He believed men were supposed to be reliable, practical, difficult to embarrass. He believed women were stronger than men in most ways, but should not be burdened with leadership if men were available to carry it. He believed feelings were private, Softness was suspicious, and public opinion was not a disease, but a civic weather pattern that had to be respected. If he saw that photo before I was ready, I did not know whether I would lose my job, my home, or just whatever remained of my nerve. Lena wanted to go to the police immediately. I wanted to disappear into the walls. We compromised by doing neither, which is often the worst compromise. All day I sat in the office trying to reconcile invoices while my phone lay face down beside the keyboard like it was radioactive. Every time it buzzed, I jumped. My father noticed by lunchtime. "You sick?" he asked from the doorway. He had our mother's dark eyes and none of her softness. "No," I said too quickly. "You look pale. Didn't sleep much." He grunted, which in his language meant either sympathy or disapproval, impossible to tell. "Drink water. People make mistakes when they're tired." Then he left. I remember staring after him and thinking if he knew me, really knew me, would he still stop at my office door to remind me to drink water, or would even that ordinary kindness be revoked? That thought followed me home and sat beside me at dinner while my father discussed shipment delays, while Lena asked neutral questions, while I moved food around my plate and waited for the next message like somebody waiting for a verdict. It arrived at 9:14 p.m. 3 words. Tomorrow. Be ready. That night Lena slept in my room, not because I asked her to, but because she dragged in the old camping mattress from the garage and said, "I'm not leaving you alone with that phone." We lay in the dark listening to the house settle. At some point I said, "What if they're right?" "About what?" "Ruining my life." Lena was quiet long enough that I thought maybe she had fallen asleep, but then she said, "A life built on fear is already being ruined. That doesn't mean tomorrow won't hurt. It means you stop confusing pain with destruction." It sounded like something Mom would have said. I turned toward the wall and cried silently until exhaustion took over. Morning came with brutal normalcy. Sunlight. Coffee. My father leaving for the store before me. The world did not pause because I was terrified. At 10:07 a.m., while I was entering purchase orders, the message arrived. Front bulletin board. I ran. There was a corkboard near the employee entrance where schedules, insurance updates, and charity flyers were pinned. At the center, beneath a notice about forklift recertification, someone had tacked a printed copy of the mirror photo. It was grainy but unmistakable. My face. My room. My secret held in thumbtacks for anyone walking past to examine. I took it down so fast the paper tore. My hands shook too hard to fold it. I heard footsteps behind me and turned expecting the whole world, but it was only Marta from inventory, 57, practical, kind, impossible to fool. Her eyes moved from my face to the paper in my hand. "Do you need the office?" she asked. That was all. No laughter. No accusation. Just a small mercy, disguised as logistics. I nodded. In my office, I shut the door and locked it, then slid down against it until I was sitting on the floor. Shame came first, hot and total. Then rage. Then, beneath both, something I had never let myself feel clearly before. I did not want to spend the rest of my life begging terrible people to spare me. I wanted air. I wanted room. I wanted my own reflection without flinching. The problem was that wanting a thing and being brave enough to claim it are not the same. My father knocked once, then tried the handle. Why is this locked? I stood so quickly I nearly blacked out. I shoved the torn photo into my shred bin and opened the door. He took one look at me and frowned. What happened? I could have lied. I had rehearsed lies my whole life. Instead, I heard myself say, "Somebody's trying to humiliate me." He stepped inside and closed the door. Who? I shook my head. I don't know. He studied me with the flat intensity that used to make me confess broken dishes and forged signatures when I was a kid. Humiliate you over what? There it was, the edge of the cliff. I felt myself swaying over it. Something private. If it can affect the business, it stops being private. That sentence might as well have been written over the entrance to our whole family. I looked at him and suddenly understood that if I told him now, in this fluorescent office with a stapler on the desk and a pallet jack rolling somewhere down the hall, the truth would become a contamination problem for him to solve. Not a child. Not a soul. A problem. So I swallowed it. It won't affect the business, I said. I'll handle it. He did not like that answer. I could see it in the way his shoulders stiffened. See that you do. Then he left, and I realized with a kind of bleak clarity that I was done waiting for my life to improve inside the terms he found acceptable. That evening, Lena drove me 40 minutes to a salon in the next city because she said if war was coming, then at the very least I deserved professional armor. The salon was called Juniper House, tucked between a bookstore and a florist, warm light spilling through front windows full of plants. I nearly refused to go in. My pulse was loud enough to hear. I can't do this, I said with my hand still on the seatbelt. You can, Lena replied. You don't have to do all of it today. Just walk inside. I wish I could say courage felt noble in moments like that, but it didn't. It felt nauseous. It felt like stepping into a room where everyone might immediately identify what was strange about you. But when I pushed open the glass door, the woman behind the front desk looked up, smiled, and said, You must be Lena's sibling. We've been expecting you. Not brother. Not sir. Not a loaded pause. Sibling. Breathing room disguised as grammar. The owner, Celia, emerged from the back with silver bracelets on one wrist and hair the color of espresso and winter sunlight. She was maybe in her early 50s, elegant without trying, and she looked at me the way my mother's letter had sounded, as if I were not a spectacle but a person in the middle of becoming. Come here, she said. Let me see you. I obeyed before embarrassment could stop me. She tilted my chin gently from side to side. Good bone structure. Great eyes. Terrible haircut. We can work with that. Lena laughed. I did too, helplessly. Something unclenched. I sat in Celia's chair while she asked no invasive questions, only practical ones. What made me feel most like myself? What I hated about my current presentation? Whether I wanted subtle or obvious? Whether I had ever gone out publicly? I answered in fragments at first, but her calm made honesty seem less lethal. I don't know if I'm just someone who needs to dress this way sometimes, I admitted, staring at my hands beneath the cape, or if I've been lying to myself about something much bigger. Celia met my eyes in the mirror. Then we don't solve your whole life tonight, she said. We help you feel possible. The rest can follow. Nobody had ever offered me a future in such manageable terms. She trimmed my hair into something softer around the face, shaped my brows a little, showed me how to correct, contour lightly, choose shades that worked with my skin instead of fighting it. She talked while she worked not just about beauty, but about survival, about the difference between costume and identity, about how many people spend decades calling themselves confused when what they really are is frightened. At one point she said, very casually, being caught is not always the same as being seen. I looked up. What's the difference? When you're caught, someone finds you before you're ready. When you're seen, you choose not to disappear. The words stayed with me. When she turned the chair to face the full mirror at the end, I forgot to breathe again, but for an entirely different reason than the night before. I was still recognizably me. She had not transformed me into somebody theatrical or impossible. She had simply moved the noise aside. My face looked open, softer, truer. I could imagine this person walking through daylight. Not easily, not without fear, but walking. Lena came to stand beside me, eyes glassy. There you are, she whispered. I almost said, I don't know who that is. But that was not true. I knew. I had always known in flashes, in private, in the aching space between longing and permission. What I did not know was whether I had the strength to let that person live. Celia must have read something on my face because she leaned one hip against the counter and said, The question isn't whether this is real. The question is what you want to do with what's real. We got our answer sooner than expected. When I returned home, there was an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. No stamp, no name. Inside was another printout of the photo and a typed note. Meet me behind Miller's feet at 8. Come alone if you want this to stay quiet. I wanted to throw up. Lena wanted to call the police again. I wanted to burn the note and pretend I had never seen it. Instead, at 7:45, wearing jeans, a hoodie, and enough panic to power a city block, I drove to the gravel lot behind the old feed warehouse where nobody went after dark. I told Lena I would text every 5 minutes. She said if I missed one, she was coming whether I liked it or not. The lot smelled like dust and rusted metal. One security light flickered over the loading dock. I had just decided nobody was coming when a figure stepped from the shadow beside a dumpster, and I recognized him instantly. Nolan Hart. We had grown up 2 houses apart. He had been my friend once, the kind of friend childhood assigns before personality catches up. We had ridden bikes, built forts, shared comic books, and drifted apart in high school when he became the kind of local golden boy who wore certainty, like a uniform. He worked at the auto shop now, lifted weights, coached Pee-wee baseball, and spoke in the confident tones of men who had never had to question the shape of their own reflection. "You," I said. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "Relax. I'm not gonna hurt you. You already did." He looked away first, which surprised me. "I saw you through the window a few nights ago. Didn't know it was you at first. Then I did." "So, you printed photos and put them at my workplace?" I wanted to get your attention. I laughed in disbelief. "You could have sent a message without turning my life into a trap." "You weren't answering. Because you were threatening me." He exhaled hard. "Look, I thought if I scared you a little, maybe you'd stop before this got worse." For one blank second, I did not understand what he meant. Then I did, and the humiliation of it almost knocked me backward. He believed he was helping. "Stop," I said. "Stop what, exactly?" He gestured vaguely, as if the air itself should explain it. "This. Whatever this is. People are talking. If your dad finds out from somebody else, it'll be bad. I was trying to give you a chance to clean it up. Clean it up. Like I was a spill. Like my existence was a mess on the floor. Anger steadied me more effectively than courage ever had. "You don't get to decide what my life needs," I said. "Maybe not, but somebody had to say it. This town doesn't work the way you think it does." "I know exactly how this town works. Men like you make sure of it." He flinched, and for the first time I saw uncertainty in him. "I'm not your enemy, Evan. You posted my face on a bulletin board." I panicked. "Because I wore a skirt in my own bedroom?" He had no answer. That was the truth of it. My private reality had frightened him more than his own cruelty did. We stood there under the failing security light, years of unspoken rules between us, and I suddenly saw the whole thing clearly. He was not powerful because he was right. He was powerful because he had always been the kind of person the world arranged itself around. He had never learned what it meant to tremble before a mirror and still want honesty. "Delete everything," I said. "If you have copies, destroy them. If you contact me again, I go to the police." He scoffed, but it lacked force. "You really think they'll care?" "Maybe not enough, but more than you think. And if they don't, Celia knows a lawyer who will." That last part was a bluff at the time, but only partly. I had texted Celia from the salon parking lot without knowing why, and she had replied, "If you need resources, I have names." "This isn't you," Nolan said, almost pleading now, as if I had somehow betrayed an agreement I never signed. "You used to be normal." "No," I said, and my voice did not shake this time. "I used to be hidden." I left him standing there. In the car, my hands shook so badly, I had to sit for 5 full minutes before driving. But beneath the fear, beneath the aftertaste of shame, something else had entered me. Not peace. Not triumph. Just the first hard outline of self-respect. The next morning I told Lena everything, and by afternoon we had the number, the printed note, and the timeline documented. Celia gave us the name of a local attorney who handled harassment cases and knew how to make people understand that dignity was not optional. We did not file immediately, but the possibility changed the balance. When Nolan texted once more, only 2 words this time, "We good?" I sent back a single reply. "Never contact me again." Then I blocked him. I wish I could say that ended the fear. It didn't. It only ended one source of it. The bigger fear was still waiting in my own house, sitting at the dinner table across from my father, following me through the hardware store office, lingering in every pause where truth might enter. For 2 weeks I lived in a state I can only describe as suspended collapse. By day I answered emails, reconciled freight invoices, and avoided eye contact with employees who may or may not have seen the bulletin board photo before I tore it down. By night Lena helped me sort through the trunk under my bed, not to expose me, but to turn chaos into choices. We laid everything out like evidence and possibility all at once. Blouses, skirts, 2 dresses, cheap wigs I no longer wanted, cardigans, tights, 1 pair of ankle boots that hurt but made me stand differently, 1 pale green sweater that made my eyes look brighter. Every piece had a memory attached to it. Buying this in a city where nobody knew me. Smuggling that past the register with my heart hammering. Wearing this at 2 a.m. for 10 minutes and then putting it away because the joy felt too dangerous. You don't need all of it, Lena said. I know. You don't need to keep the things that belong to fear. That became our strange little ritual, editing not just clothing but versions of me. Some things went into donation bags. Some stayed. Some were tried on again under honest light and turned out to be fantasies that did not fit my real body or taste. It was the first time femininity stopped being an abstract rescue boat and started becoming personal. Not woman as costume, but me as me. Quiet colors, soft lines, less performance, more recognition. One night Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, holding up a navy dress against my chest and asked, "Have you thought about a name?" I froze. I had imagined names privately for years, the way a child tests secret signatures in notebook margins, but to answer aloud felt irreversible. "Maybe," I said. "Tell me." I swallowed. "Evelyn." She smiled so fast it nearly broke me. "Mom's middle name." "I know." "Then I love it." I looked at the dress in my hands. "I'm scared that if I say it too early, I'll lose it." "You won't lose it," she said. "At worst, you'll discover it changes. But fear doesn't get naming rights." That line stayed with me too. Lena kept handing me language when I had none. And still, for all the progress in private, I had not told my father. He became more watchful as my silences grew. One Saturday, he asked why I was driving to the city so often. "Haircuts," I said. He looked at my softer style and grunted. "Seems expensive." Another night, he picked up a receipt I had forgotten in the laundry room, saw the salon name, and asked if I was seeing someone there. "No." "Then what are you doing?" "Taking care of myself." He frowned as if the phrase itself seemed suspicious. "You've been strange lately." Strange. The most ordinary word for alienation. I almost laughed. Instead I said, "Maybe I'm tired of pretending I'm not." That should have opened everything, but it didn't. He stared at me for a moment, then went back to scraping his plate. That was the problem with families built on silence. Sometimes you could place a truth in the middle of the table, and everyone would agree not to see it. The actual confrontation came by accident, which is to say it came by inevitability. 3 weeks after the bulletin board incident, I came home early from the store because a shipment had been delayed and my father had gone to inspect another property we owned outside town. I thought I had the house to myself. Lena was at work. I went upstairs, changed, and spent almost an hour practicing makeup in the mirror while watching a tutorial. I wore the pale green sweater, a dark midi skirt, and simple earrings Lena had bought me without announcement and left on my pillow. I was halfway through removing everything when I heard my father's truck in the driveway. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed wipes, but the mascara had already stained faintly. The earrings were still in. The skirt was still on. His footsteps hit the front hallway. Mine did not move. I think some exhausted, hidden part of me finally refused. He knocked once and opened the door without waiting. We stared at each other. There are moments when a whole life rearranges itself in silence. This was one of them. His gaze moved from my face to the sweater, to the skirt, to the scattered cosmetics on the desk, then back to my face. I had imagined this scene so many times that I thought I knew the shape of it, but I had always pictured yelling first. Instead, he looked old. Not weak, not broken, just suddenly older than he had that morning. "What is this?" he said at last, and it was not really a question. I stood very still. "The truth." He closed the door behind him. "No," his voice sharpened. "You answer properly." Fear spiked, but something harder rose with it. "I've answered improperly my whole life." His jaw tightened. "Take that off." I thought of every night I had hidden, every hour I had apologized inwardly for existing, every cruel message, every careful step toward air. And I heard myself say, No, that single syllable landed between us like a thrown stone. He took 2 steps into the room. You think you can play games with me? This isn't a game. Then what is it? There it was, the question at the center of everything, and I could not answer it with safe vagueness anymore. I don't know every part of it yet, I said, voice shaking but audible. I know that when I look like this, I don't feel false. I feel more like myself than I ever have pretending to be what you wanted. He stared at me as if I had started speaking another language. You're my son. The sentence hit like a verdict. I almost folded under it. Instead I said, I know that's what you believed. The room went silent enough to hear the air vent. His eyes narrowed, then shifted to the letter from Mom lying on my desk where I had been reading it again the night before. He picked it up before I could stop him. What is this? Don't. He already had. I watched him recognize her handwriting. Something in his face changed, not softened, exactly, but loosened from anger into something more dangerous and human. He read the first line standing there. Then he sat down in my desk chair without meaning to, as if his knees had made the decision for him. I had never seen my father sit down in shock. By the time he reached the middle of the page, he was breathing through his nose the way he did when he was trying not to show emotion. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully, too carefully, and set it back on the desk. She knew, he said. Yes. And she said nothing to me. It was the wrong hurt, but I understood it. Maybe she knew how you'd react. He looked up sharply. You think I'm some kind of monster? I think you care more about order than truth when truth embarrasses you. He flinched. Not visibly enough for anyone else to catch, maybe, but I saw it because I had spent my whole life studying whether I was safe. This is not about embarrassment, he said. Then what is it about? The answer did not come immediately. I watched him search for words he had probably never rehearsed. My brother, he said at last, so quietly I almost thought I misheard. What? He rubbed one hand over his mouth. My older brother. Not the one you knew. The one before him. I stood motionless. He had never once mentioned another sibling. When I was 12, he said, eyes fixed on the floor now. My oldest brother left town. My father said he was sick in the head. My mother said he was confused. Nobody used the right words, not then. He wore women's clothes. Wanted another name. Brought disgrace down on the family, according to everyone who mattered. They cut him off. We all acted like he had never existed. The air left my lungs in a rush. A hidden ghost in the family tree. Did you ever see him again? My father shook his head. No. Did Mom know? Eventually. He laughed once, bitterly. Your mother knew everything I didn't say. He looked at me then, really looked, not as an employee, not as an extension of himself, but as a person standing in front of him in a skirt with a dead woman's blessing on the desk. I told myself if I ever saw signs of that kind of confusion in my own child, I would cut it off before it swallowed him. It isn't confusion. You don't know that. I know enough. Enough to throw your life away. That almost made me angry again, but I saw something else underneath his words. Not disgust. Terror. Inheritance fear. The old violence of shame moving down generations disguised as concern. Maybe that's what you were taught to call it, I said quietly. Throwing life away. Maybe what I'm actually doing is trying to have one. We stood there surrounded by cosmetics, memory, and the debris of every unsaid year. At length he said, What exactly are you telling me? It was the question I had dreaded more than any other because it demanded definition before I had fully finished becoming. I chose honesty over certainty. I'm telling you I have spent most of my life feeling wrong inside the version of me everybody recognized. I started dressing in private because it was the only way I could breathe. I thought maybe that was all it was. But it hasn't stayed small. The more honest I am, the more I think this may be bigger than clothes. I may be your daughter. His eyes closed briefly. When they opened, there were 10 years of fatigue in them. May be. Yes. So you're not even sure. I'm sure that hiding is killing me. He stood up slowly. I need time. Then he left the room. Not storming out. Not forgiving me. Just leaving with his own history newly visible in the shape of his shoulders. I sank onto the bed, and shook so hard I thought I might be sick. When Lena got home, she found me still there, half-dressed, mascara on one cheek, staring at nothing. She sat beside me and listened to every word. When I told her about the hidden brother, she whispered, "Oh." It was the sound of a family mystery cracking open. "Do you think he'll tell you more?" she asked. "I don't know. Do you think he'll throw you out?" I looked toward the hall. "I don't know that either." But he didn't. The next few weeks were colder in some ways than outright rage would have been. He became meticulously polite. He did not mention what he had seen. He did not mention the letter. He did not mention his brother. But he also did not barge into my room again, did not criticize my softer haircut, did not throw away the package from the cosmetics store when it arrived by mail. It was as if my truth had become a large, fragile object set in the middle of the house and nobody was allowed to touch it without gloves. It might have stayed like that for months if not for the charity banquet. Every autumn, the town hosted a fundraising dinner for the hospital wing, half social event, half public performance of local respectability. The hardware store always sponsored a table. My father always attended. This year he told me, in the most neutral voice imaginable, "You're coming with us." I looked up from the office computer. As what? His face did not change, but his jaw did. As family. That answer haunted me for days. Lena assumed it meant he expected me in a suit, restored to the role as if our conversation had been a fever dream. I thought she was probably right. But then, 2 nights before the banquet, he knocked on my bedroom door and entered holding a flat rectangular box from a department store in the city. He set it on my bed. "Your mother ordered this before she died," he said. I found it in the hall closet behind old tax files. Never knew what it was. My heart began to pound. I opened the box. Inside was a dress. Dark blue, elegant, simple, with long sleeves and a waist that would flatter without announcing itself. There was no note this time, only a receipt with my mother's name and a date from 13 days before her diagnosis turned irreversible. I looked up at him. He kept his gaze on the window. "I think she knew your size better than I did." I could not speak. He finally looked at me then. "I don't understand this," he said. "I may never understand it the way you want me to, but I am done pretending that cruelty is the same thing as strength." Tears rose, so fast I had to blink hard to keep seeing him. "What does that mean?" He exhaled through his nose. "It means if you come to that dinner, you come as the person your mother was trying to make room for. I won't have this family split open in whispers." For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. I mean if the town is going to talk, let them do it while looking us in the face." That was not acceptance in the language I had fantasized about. It was not a speech of unconditional love. It was not easy or graceful, but it was a bridge built out of the materials he had. I cried then, standing over the dress box, and he stood there awkwardly until finally, he placed one rough hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, and said, very quietly, "I should have done better by my brother. Maybe this is my chance not to fail again." I wore the dress to the banquet. Celia did my makeup and styled my hair softly away from my face. Lena wore green and cried twice before we even left the house. My father wore his usual charcoal suit and an expression that suggested he was about to walk into a storm by choice. In the car, halfway there, he said, "What name?" My pulse spiked. "What? If anyone asks." I looked at my hands in my lap. "Evelyn." He nodded once. "Your mother liked that name." That nearly undid me. The hotel ballroom had chandeliers, linen tablecloths, and exactly the kind of polished local crowd I had feared all my life, people who noticed everything and mistook noticing for moral authority. When we entered, conversation did not stop completely, but it bent. Heads turned. Some faces registered confusion. Some curiosity, some instantly masked recognition as if decency required pretending not to have one. I felt every step in my knees. I also felt my father beside me, solid and unmistakably present. People greeted him first out of habit. Then they looked at me. He did not leave space for speculation. "This is my daughter, Evelyn," he said to the first donor who approached. Not loudly, not bravely in the cinematic sense, just clearly. The donor blinked, recovered, shook my hand, and said it was nice to meet me. I cannot explain what it did to hear the word daughter in my father's voice in public. It did not erase the past. It did not cure fear. But it opened a future I had not dared sketch. The night was not painless. One woman stared too long. One man avoided me entirely after realizing who I was. Two people whispered in a corner and glanced over more than once. But others surprised me. Marta from inventory kissed my cheek and said, "There she is." The hospital director's wife complimented my dress. An elderly florist I barely knew took my hand and told me I had my mother's eyes. The world did not end. Suspense had trained me to expect catastrophe in every doorway, yet here I was moving through a ballroom in low heels, terrified and alive, not because nobody could see me, but because they could. Later, while dessert was being served, a man in his 60s approached our table. He had a narrow face and the same dark eyes my father had. My father went still before he even spoke. "David," the man said. My father stared at him as if a ghost had walked in wearing a rented tuxedo. The man turned to me. "You must be the reason he finally stopped running." I knew at once. "Uncle," he smiled sadly. "I go by Diana now." I thought my heart would stop. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. My father sat frozen, color drained from his face. Diana pulled out the empty chair at our table and sat without waiting for permission, like someone who had already spent a lifetime being denied entrances and no longer believed in asking. "Your mother contacted me 3 months before she died," she said. "Eyes on me now. Found me through an old friend of an old friend. She said she thought someone in the family might need a path that hadn't existed for me." I looked at my father. He could not seem to speak. "Why didn't you tell us?" Lena whispered. Diana's expression softened. "Because your father asked me never to come back." The words hit the table like a dropped glass. My father flinched as if struck. "I was 19, he said hoarsely. "You repeated our father's words like they were your own," Diana replied. "I know." Silence spread among us, heavy and public and impossible to fold away. I did not know whether to comfort either of them. I barely knew how to remain upright. Diana looked at me again and smiled, and this time I saw my mother in it somehow, in the pity-free kindness. "You look frightened," she said. "That means you're doing something real." I laughed through tears. Everybody keeps saying versions of that. Because it's true. The banquet went on around us, while old family history rose from the floorboards. By the end of the night, my father had apologized only once, awkwardly and without flourish, but Diana accepted it with the weariness of someone who understood that forgiveness and repair are cousins, not twins. She gave me a card before leaving. "If you need someone who's walked further down this road than your father or sister can, call me." I held that card all the way home like it was evidence that lineage could be rewritten. After the banquet, things changed faster. Not magically, not uniformly, but change had been given public permission, and that mattered. At the store, my father called me Evelyn in private first, stumbling over it like a new tool, then gradually in front of others when no customers were close, then eventually without checking who might hear. Lena corrected people with shameless efficiency. Celia helped me build a wardrobe that matched me instead of fantasy. Diana took me to lunch in the city and told me stories no one else in the family had preserved, about the years she spent surviving under other names, about the cost of disappearing, about the quiet joy of finally buying shoes because they made her happy rather than because they defended a disguise. She also told me something that I had needed desperately. "You do not owe anybody a dramatic certainty right away," she said over tea in a bright cafe where no one stared. "People always want a single sentence they can file you under. Real identity rarely arrives that neatly. Sometimes the truest thing you can say is that honesty is making one direction easier to survive than the other." I repeated that line to myself for weeks. Because transition, once I allowed myself to think the word without flinching, did not unfold like revelation. It unfolded like alignment, small and relentless. I started growing my hair. I practiced my voice in the car, quietly at first, then with more confidence. I shifted my clothes at home, then in the city, then at the store on selected days. always carrying panic in one pocket and relief in the other. Some people were kind immediately. Some adapted because the social weather changed around them. Some never stopped looking confused, as if I were a math problem that refused to simplify. Nolan avoided me entirely, which I preferred. Once, months later, he saw me outside the pharmacy, opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. I kept walking. He no longer got to define the frame. The hardest days were often the most ordinary ones. Buying foundation under fluorescent lights while a teenager at the register called me sir. Hearing old voicemail greetings with my dead name on them and freezing. Signing forms that did not match the face I was slowly learning to inhabit. Watching strangers decide in half a second whether they thought I made sense. But even those days contained a strange mercy. The pain was moving. It was no longer the stagnant pain of suppression. It was the growing pain of change. My father and I fought more than once. He made mistakes. He asked blunt questions at the wrong times. He called my choices impractical when he was scared. I accused him of making my becoming sound like an inconvenience. He accused me of underestimating how hard the town could be. Both things were true in different ways. But he kept showing up. One Sunday, he stood outside a courthouse with me while I filed name change paperwork, hat in his hands, silent as winter, and when the clerk called out Evelyn Hart, he turned toward the sound before I did. Another time, after a customer at the store muttered something ugly under his breath while I was rearranging paint samples, my father came out from behind the counter and said in a voice everyone could hear, "You can shop somewhere else if decency confuses you." The customer left. I nearly cried into the color swatches. Lena started saying that Mom would have been unbearable about all of this in the best way, buying me scarves I didn't need, insisting on photos, crying at every milestone. We talked about her more openly then, and I realized how much of my fear had also been grief. I had mourned not only the mother who died, but the imagined mother who would never know me. Yet she had known, in the best way available to her. She had left a dress in a box, a letter in a drawer, a map hidden in love. Winter turned to spring. The hardware store survived the gossip. The town did too. People always think visibility is a bomb. Most of the time it is weather. Harsh at first, then normalized by repetition. New customers came in who only knew me as Evelyn. Old ones adapted. Some said nothing at all, which was its own uneasy truce. One teenage cashier from the grocery store stopped me in the cereal aisle one morning and said, very fast, "I just wanted to tell you it matters that you're here," then fled before I could answer. I stood there holding oatmeal like a fool and cried in public for the third time that month. When you grow up believing your truth is a private defect, you do not anticipate becoming someone else's evidence that survival is possible. I began attending a support group in the city every other Thursday. At first, I barely spoke. Then I started listening harder. Stories braided into mine. A teacher who transitioned at 52 after raising 3 children. A college student whose parents still mailed clothes to a hidden campus address. A trans man who said grief and relief sometimes wore the same coat. An older woman who told me, "We all begin by thinking we are alone, and then we discover loneliness," was one of the lies. That might be the sentence that finally shifted something permanent in me. I started hormone therapy that summer. I did not treat it like a magical solution or a symbolic finale. I treated it like what it was for me, another step in the same direction my heart had already been moving. The changes were gradual, intimate, sometimes frustratingly slow, but they felt less like becoming someone new and more like static leaving a radio signal. Every little shift in skin, mood, contour, self-recognition mattered because of what it confirmed. I was not moving away from myself. I was moving toward her, toward me. My father struggled, most with time. "I blink and everything changes," he said once while helping me fix a flat tire in the driveway. "It was changing the whole time," I answered. "You just couldn't see it." He tightened the lug nuts and gave me a sideways look. Fair. He still kept a photo in his wallet of me at 17 in a bad graduation suit. One evening, almost a year after he first saw me in my room, he showed it to me while we sat on the back porch after dinner. "I used to look at this and think I was seeing my son growing up," he said. "Now I look at it and think I was seeing how hard you were working." I took the photo from him. My own younger face looked so careful, so absent and overcomposed. "I don't hate who I was," I said quietly. "I just can't live there anymore." He nodded. "I'm beginning to understand that. It was enough. Maybe not for a stranger's idea of redemption, but enough for us." Lena moved into her own apartment that autumn. On the day she packed the last box, she found the old trunk under my bed still tucked in the corner. "You keeping this?" she asked. I looked at it for a long time. It had been my confessional, my prison, my dressing room, my evidence locker. "No," I said. We dragged it to the curb together for bulk pickup. I half expected to feel panic watching it go, but what I felt was lighter than that. Not freedom exactly. More like accuracy. I no longer needed a piece of furniture designed around concealment. The following winter I got a message from Diana asking whether I wanted to spend the anniversary of Mom's death with her in the city. "Not to be sad only," she wrote. "To be honest." We went to a museum first because Mom had loved paintings that looked like storms thinking about sunlight. Then we had dinner in a small restaurant where the waiter called us ladies without effort. On the walk back to the parking garage, snow just beginning to fall, Diana said, "Your mother gave me something back too, you know." "What?" "A way to come home without asking permission." I looked at her profile in the streetlight and understood that transition is never purely individual. One person's courage reopens old locked rooms. One life told honestly changes the architecture around it. She smiled when I started crying. "Good," she said. "Keep some of that softness. The world will ask you to harden. Choose carefully." By the second year, people who had once whispered now asked me for paint recommendations without blinking. New routines formed. New photos replaced the old ones on the mantle. My father even learned to answer the phone without hesitation when someone asked for Evelyn at the office. Occasionally, he overcompensated and became bizarrely protective, correcting relatives before they had even finished speaking, as if speed might redeem history. Lena teased him mercilessly for it. I let her. Some wounds heal through seriousness. Others heal through ordinary family laughter in kitchens that once held only tension. I would be lying if I said every twist in the story led upward. There were setbacks. A doctor who was careless with pronouns. A county clerk who made a face at my paperwork. A former classmate who cornered me at a gas station and asked if I regretted becoming a spectacle, to which I replied, with more calm than I felt, only when men mistake curiosity for entitlement. There were nights I still looked in the mirror and saw traces of the old disguise and felt grief flare unexpectedly. There were mornings I woke up exhausted by the labor of being legible in a world that treats gender like a locked door everyone is expected to fit through one way only. But even then, even in the hard stretches, I never again wished for the numbness I had mistaken for safety before. That version of life had been smaller than sorrow, smaller than fear, smaller than me. The real turning point, if I had to choose one, came not at the banquet or the courthouse or the salon, but on an ordinary Tuesday when I was restocking shelf labels at the store and a little girl, maybe 7 years old, tugged on her mother's sleeve and pointed at me. I braced automatically, waiting for the parent to hush her or steer her away. Instead, the little girl looked right at me and said, "Your earrings are pretty." I smiled and thanked her. She nodded as if that settled everything and moved on to the display of flashlight batteries. The simplicity of it nearly brought me to my knees. Children often see more honestly than adults. They just have not yet learned which truths other people fear. Pretty earrings. Not contradiction. Not scandal. Just detail. Just a woman in a store. I went into the stockroom and cried because sometimes the heart cannot distinguish between relief and heartbreak when both arrive at once. Years later, when people ask me how it started, I could offer the neat version. I could say I was caught in my room, my sister found me, my mother had left a letter, and everything changed. That version is not false, but it is too tidy for the life it describes. The truth is that I was caught many times before that night by my own reflection, by the ache in dressing rooms I pretended not to notice, by the jealousy I felt toward women who moved through the world with an ease I could only taste in secret, by every joke that landed on me like a warning, by every morning I put on the expected version of myself and felt a little farther away. And I was feminized, if someone insists on the word, not by force, not by mockery, not by any cruel fantasy of being remade against my will, but by honesty, by permission, by grief, by lipstick wiped off and put back on, by a sister who chose loyalty over comfort, by a mother who loved me well enough to leave a map, by an aunt who returned from exile with her own name intact, by a father who learned too late that love without room is just another kind of control, and then learned, imperfectly but genuinely, how to make room anyway. I was feminized by the moment I stopped treating beauty like evidence against me. By the hour, I chose a name that felt like home. By the day, I understood that softness and strength had never been enemies, only strangers introduced badly. I tell the story now because suspense always made my old life feel inevitable, as if discovery would destroy me, as if one open door would end everything. But what the open door actually ended was the loneliness of pretending there was nothing on the other side. If you had seen me that first night after Lena closed the door, trembling in a cheap skirt, convinced my life was over, you would never have believed where the road led. You would not have imagined court forms and salon mirrors, public dinners and inherited names, hard conversations and small miracles in grocery aisles, grief stitched to courage, whole years of becoming. The long, patient labor of stepping into visibility. You would not have imagined that one day I would wake up, put on a sweater without panic, answer to Evelyn without that tiny internal flinch, look at my own hands and see not evidence of deception but proof of survival. Yet that is the shape my life took once I stopped abandoning myself. And maybe that is the hook that keeps me telling it, the thing that still feels almost impossible even now. The worst night of my secret life was also the first honest night of my real one, and every twist that followed, every terror, every revelation, every bruise and blessing led me not into ruin, but into recognition, until at last the girl hidden in locked drawers, in smudged mirrors, in midnight longing, stood in full daylight and understood that being seen had been worth every trembling step, because the final surprise was not that the world could change around the truth, but that I could survive long enough to become it.